Hi, everybody. We're back. This is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback, and we are live with a special guest today. We're talking money and markets, religion, redemption. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, the decentralization, and how we can save American education and really education writ large. And we have a rare treat. We have a professor of religion from Columbia. This goes back to my old days as a religion student. So this is really exciting. I'm blown away. We have Mark C. Taylor, Professor, Department of Religion at Columbia. He's going to join us to discuss his book, Confidence Games, Money and Markets in a World Without Redemption. And he sort of prophesied the death of education as we know it. And he's an educator, so he can, he's not anti-education. And then also even Bitcoin.
I'm excited about this show, but for people who've never heard of you, describe your background.
Well, I'm a professor of religion at Columbia University, taught for many years at Williams College before moving to Columbia. I've written on a range of subjects related to contemporary society and culture, more philosophical. Back in back about 2000, I started a company called Global Education Network with Herbert Allen from an investment bank in New York City to do online education, but we were ahead of our time.
You have a book that sort of prophesied, this was, I believe, written in 2004, that prophesied the rise of Bitcoin and the decentralization of the American education system as we know it. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I had long been interested in the interrelationship between broader cultural tendencies and economics and financial markets. One of the things I often will say is that I believe economics is too important to be left to economists. And by that, I mean that to understand financial markets and economy, we have to understand the cultural context in which they function. And what the economy that has emerged in the last 20 or 30 years is deeply tied up with broader cultural tendencies that began to take shape in the 1960s, and that's part of what I was getting at. I can be more specific about that if you'd like me to.
I'd love to. This reminds me of my. I am a minor theological scholar, from days of old.
Right.
So it's exciting to hear this. So wouldn't you say, now we're going to get to your theories because I really want to hear about this. Now, for those of you who might be listening to this as a financial show, why are you going all religious on us? I don't know if you believe this, but I believe everything is religious. Everyone has a religion,
Right?
even if it's not a formalized religion. And I think a lot of the problems we see today is precisely because, and you can give us some color and background of what you've done, but we are seeing right now in the infighting of the culture, the product of a culture that has gone materialistic. Our religion is materialism or existentialism, meaning the self.
Right.
So when you have a world where everyone has this belief that's centered on things or self, you get this breakdown that we're seeing today. You want to talk about that, Professor Taylor?
Sure. I mean, I agree basically with you. I often will say that religion is not simply what takes place in churches, temples, and mosques, but there's a religious dimension to all of culture. And I think religion is most influential often when it's least obvious. So yeah, the title of the book that you referred to is Confidence Games. And of course, there's a double entendre in that. I mean, the economy presupposes confidence, as do our political institutions. But of course, the confidence game is also a scam. The confidence man is the one who pulls this scam. So confidence is a complicated kind of phenomenon. I think that, as I said, I think a lot of the problems that we're currently facing, some of which you referred to, can be traced back to the 1960s in different ways. And we think of the 1960s as being sort of the counterculture. There were enormous changes that took place during that period. We think of it as sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But one of the things that was happening in that cultural turmoil was a deep questioning of the foundations of meaning, belief, and action on the part of many. And the metaphor, as it were, for the questioning of those foundations became what was called the death of God. I'm sure you've studied theology, you probably heard of that in the 1960s. And what that really meant was not any kind of literal sense of death of God, whatever that would mean, but rather the loss of the foundation that had grounded meaning and value for many, many people. And that led to all kinds of unrest, uncertainty, anxiety, as you suggest. There was something similar going on in the world of economics and finance at that time. And I think one of the critical moments in that development was in 1973. Now, in the late 60s, we had enormous economic stress, partly as a result of the war in Vietnam, the Great Society. In the early 70s, the first Arab oil embargo. But in 1973, the United States went off the gold standard. And the gold standard had been suspended during the Second World War. It was reinstated on a modified basis at Bretton Woods in 1944 and 45. And it functioned with increasing difficulty throughout the 60s until it was finally suspended in 1973. Gold, in effect, functioned in the economic system like God functioned in the religious system, that it was supposed to serve as the base, as the foundation, the anchor of value. When the gold standard was suspended, it was first suspended in 1973. Nixon was president, Connally was secretary of the Treasury. And for 2 years, from 71 to 73, they tried to maintain fixed exchange rates. That proved futile. And in 1973, after decoupling the dollar from gold in 1973, they let currency rates float, which means that the currency was, the value of the currency was a function of its relationship to other currencies, rather than its relationship to some kind of material entity like gold. So you had a shift in the way in which meaning and value were determined. They no longer had a secure ground, but now were relative to each other. The same year, 1973, that the gold standard was finally suspended, Reuters introduced its first electronic global currency exchange system. Once you have those two factors, the decoupling of gold from the dollar from gold, or the what we call the sign from the ground of its value assign, and currencies wired, you have the conditions of what become the financial economy, of which Bitcoin is, in my judgment, the logical conclusion.
Fascinating. So we'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll be back with Professor Taylor talking about money and markets in a world without redemption, and how do we get ourselves back, because our culture is lost. I think the only way we get our culture back is probably through God and a relationship with God, because there seems to be just a more, it's the foundations of our whole society, how we engage with one another, blatant disrespect on both sides of the aisle. So we'll be back. This is Josh Jalinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial.
The preceding program was sponsored by the Jalinski Advisory Group.
Any awards, rankings, or recognition by unaffiliated third parties or publications, including 5-Star Wealth Manager, Advisory of the Year finalist by Senior Market Advisor, and Top of the $1 Million Roundtable, are in no way indicative of the advisor's future performance or any individual client's investment success. No award, ranking, or recognition should be construed as a current or past endorsement of Josh Jalinski or Wealth Quarterback LLC. Information regarding specific awards, rankings, or recognitions is available on the Wealth Quarterback website at www.jalinski.org. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. Investment strategies such as asset allocation, diversification, or rebalancing do not assure or guarantee better performance and cannot eliminate the risk of investment losses. There are no guarantees that a portfolio employing these or any other strategy will outperform a portfolio that does not engage in such strategies. This broadcast should not be construed by any client or prospective client as a solicitation to effect or attempt to effect transactions in securities or the rendering of personalized investment advice. Due to various factors, including changing market conditions, the information discussed in this broadcast may no longer be reflective of current positions or recommendations. While information presented is believed to be factual and up to date, Josh Jalinski and Wealth Quarterback do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. The tax and estate planning information discussed is general in nature, is provided for informational purposes only, and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Listeners should consult an attorney or tax professional regarding their specific legal or tax situation.
Advisory services offered through Wealth Quarterback LLC.